What if the soul of the 60s wasn't born in Detroit, but in London? What if one of the greatest voices of soul music didn't come from the American South, but from a shy, anxious British woman with a towering blonde beehive and a secret that could have ended her career? Before Adele, before Amy Winehouse, before Blue-Eyed Soul became a chart-topping phenomenon, there was Dusty Springfield. She didn't just sing soul, she felt it. Her voice carried pain, glamour, rebellion, and something rawer than pop had ever heard. But behind every note was conflict. A woman torn between who she was and who the world demanded her to be. This is not just a story about a singer. It's about the moment British pop discovered its soul, and the price one woman paid to make that happen. How did Dusty Springfield, a perfectionist outsider, change the sound of popular music forever? And how did her greatest masterpiece, Dusty in Memphis, nearly destroy her career before becoming one of the most celebrated albums of all time? Today, we remember the hits. You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, Son of a Preacher Man, The Look of Love. But few remember the woman who fought racism on stage, defied gender expectations in secret, and chased a sound that would redefine pop itself. Is the untold story of Dusty Springfield, the reluctant icon who turned heartbreak into art and proved that soul has no color, no borders, and no limits. In 1950s London, the air was thick with dust and dreams. The war had ended, but the grayness lingered. Rationing was still fresh in memory, and pop music, if you could call it that, was mostly polite, predictable, and painfully clean. Radio stations played easy-listening crooners and light dance tunes. Everything sounded safe, predictable, British. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, something different was happening. On small radio stations in Detroit, Memphis, and New Orleans, a new kind of sound was rising, gritty, alive, unapologetic. Gospel met rhythm and blues, and the result was soul. It was raw emotion pressed into vinyl. But in England, that sound was still a rumor carried by sailors, record collectors, and late-night broadcasts from Radio Luxembourg. Hold that sound in your head. Now add post-war London. Gray brick streets, fogged-up windows, and teenagers hungry for color. They wanted something real, something to break the walls of politeness their parents had built. Among those kids was a shy, middle-class girl named Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien. She'd sneak into her brother's room to listen to American records, imagining herself somewhere beyond the London suburbs. Her mother called her dramatic. Her teachers called her difficult. But music gave her a voice before she ever had the courage to speak. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Dusty Springfield didn't just want to sing. She needed to. She grew up in a house where silence was heavy, where emotions weren't easily spoken. So she found a language that could hold them all: song. By the late 1950s, Britain was beginning to hum with change. Skiffle groups played in coffee bars. The Beatles were still kids in Liverpool. Rock and roll had cracked the door open, but soul hadn't walked through yet. And for women, the industry was even smaller. Singers were expected to be sweet, polite, and interchangeable. Dusty was none of those things. Her first step into the spotlight came with the Springfields, a folk pop trio formed with her brother Tom. They wore matching outfits, sang cheerful harmonies, and smiled on cue. It was radio-friendly and respectable, and Dusty hated it. She once joked that she felt like she was wearing musical handcuffs. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, London's underground clubs were shifting. American blues imports were finding new homes in smoky basements. Young musicians were discovering Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin. And suddenly, emotion wasn't something to hide. Dusty started to feel the pull. The sweet folk harmonies of the Springfields began to sound hollow next to the music that stirred her. She wanted the fire of gospel, the ache of soul, the grit of rhythm and blues. But there was no space in British pop for a white woman to sing like that. Not yet. So she created one. In 1963, she left the Springfields and reinvented herself. She didn't just change her name. She built a new identity. Dusty Springfield became more than a stage name. It was armor. It was freedom. She teased her hair into a massive blonde beehive, wore heavy eyeliner that made her eyes look eternal, and sang with a voice that could go from velvet to thunder in a single breath. Her debut solo single, I Only Want to Be With You, exploded onto the airwaves that same year. It was British pop, but with something deeper pulsing beneath. Motown rhythms, gospel phrasing, a full-bodied soulfulness that no other British singer had touched. It was new, it was risky, and it worked. Here's the piece that ties it all together. Dusty's sound didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built from contradictions, the primness of post-war Britain colliding with the passion of American soul, a shy girl finding her voice through black music, a perfectionist learning that imperfection was the point. By the time the rest of Britain caught up, Dusty had already crossed the ocean, musically, if not yet physically. She'd heard something in those records from Detroit and Memphis that British pop had never dared to feel. Emotion, desire, truth. And that truth would soon take her far from London, to the heart of American soul music itself. But as she'd soon learn, chasing authenticity came with a price. Because before Dusty could make her masterpiece, she'd have to face the world that doubted she could ever belong there. When Dusty Springfield went solo, the industry thought they knew what they were getting. Another polished pop singer with a few catchy hooks and a photogenic smile. But within months, everyone realized they were wrong. Something about her sound felt different. Dangerous, even. It wasn't British pop anymore. It was something new. Pop with a pulse, emotion soaked in velvet and fire. After her debut single, I Only Want to Be With You, everything changed. The song wasn't a slow burn. It was a detonation. When it hit the airwaves in 1963, people stopped what they were doing. It had that wall of sound feel, bold brass and drums, but underneath it was a kind of ache. Dusty didn't just sing the song, she felt it, and you could hear that in every breath. Freeze the frame. Listen to the hook one more time. It's cheerful on the surface. But there's a strange melancholy in her phrasing. That was Dusty's secret weapon. Emotional contradiction. She could smile while breaking your heart. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Motown was rising. The Supremes, the Temptations, Martha Reeves. American soul had found its rhythm, and Dusty was one of the few British artists who truly got it. She wasn't trying to imitate, she was trying to connect. She studied the phrasing, the swing, the humanity in those voices. Where others heard novelty, Dusty heard truth. In early 1964, she began performing Motown covers live, and critics didn't know what to make of it. They called it too American, too emotional, even too black. But the kids? They were hooked. They felt it instantly. Dusty's voice gave white British audiences their first real taste of soul, and once they heard it, they couldn't go back. Hold that sound in your head. Now add courage. Because when Dusty brought those songs to television, she didn't just sing them, she brought the people who made them. In 1965, she hosted a UK TV special called The Sound of Motown. She personally invited the Temptations, the Miracles, Martha and the Vandellas, and Stevie Wonder to perform. British television executives hesitated. They weren't sure how audiences would react to a fully black lineup on national TV. Dusty didn't care. She told them, "Either they're all on, or I'm not doing it." Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Dusty on stage, eyes closed, lost in the rhythm, surrounded by Motown legends. She wasn't just introducing a sound. She was integrating it into British pop culture. That moment planted a seed that would grow for decades. And then the backlash landed. British press called her too soulful, too dramatic, too self-indulgent. They wanted the bubbly blonde. She gave them heartbreak and grit. But Dusty was relentless. She spent endless hours in the studio, chasing perfection. Every vocal take had to carry emotion, texture, truth. Engineers would roll their eyes. She demanded dozens of retakes. But when she finally nailed it, the room tilted. That same year, she recorded "You Don't Have to Say You Love Me." It was a song built on heartbreak, grand, orchestral, and soul-stirring. When she performed it, you could feel her trembling between the notes, like she was confessing something she couldn't say out loud. The record shot to #1 in the UK and cracked the US charts. Dusty had crossed over. Freeze that moment. A British woman standing shoulder to shoulder with the giants of soul. The industry finally gave her a title, the Queen of Blue-Eyed Soul. But behind that crown was exhaustion. Every note cost her. Still, Dusty wasn't content with fame. She wanted authenticity. She wanted to sing where soul was born. That meant leaving London and walking straight into the heart of American music. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Dusty didn't go to Memphis to prove she belonged. She went because she believed in something bigger. That soul was a language anyone could speak if they meant it. But the next step would test that belief. In the land of Otis Redding and Aretha Franklin, she would have to prove herself all over again. By 1968, Dusty Springfield had everything the industry said she should want: fame, hits, and headlines. But behind the glamour, something was cracking. The British pop scene was speeding toward psychedelia, and Dusty's lush, dramatic ballads were starting to sound like they belonged to another decade. Critics called her out of touch. She called herself lost. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, soul music was evolving fast. Aretha Franklin had become a force of nature. Otis Redding's legacy was immortal. And Atlantic Records, the home of American soul, was rewriting what pop could feel like. And this is where Dusty did something no one expected. She didn't chase trends. She crossed oceans. In late 1968, she flew to Memphis, Tennessee, to record with the same people who made her idols legends: producer Jerry Wexler, arranger Arif Mardin, and engineer Tom Dowd. She wasn't invited because she was a soul singer. She invited herself because she wanted to learn how to become one. But when Dusty arrived at the studio, she froze. Surrounded by the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, some of the tightest players in history, she suddenly felt like an imposter. She refused to sing in front of them at first. The band laid down tracks while she hid in the control room, whispering that she wasn't good enough. Hold that scene in your mind. A world-class singer, trembling behind the glass, afraid to open her mouth. It's not arrogance, it's perfectionism. It's fear that what she felt might not sound authentic enough. Eventually, she found her courage. And when she did, the room tilted. The first track she cut, Son of a Preacher Man, wasn't just another pop single. It was a statement. Freeze the frame. Solo that vocal for a second. Hear that smoky whisper? That's not technique. That's tension. She leans on the words like they're secrets. When she slides through, the only one who could ever reach me. You can feel the ache and temptation twist together. It's the sound of restraint, of someone fighting to stay composed while her heart is on fire. Here's the one studio trick you can't unhear after this. Dusty layered her own harmonies in thick, cathedral-like stacks. Every breath is doubled or tripled, so her voice sounds both intimate and infinite at the same time, like she's whispering in your ear from across eternity. That's the Dusty Springfield sound, confession wrapped in echo. Now listen under the vocal. The rhythm section is deceptively simple. A soft kick drum heartbeat. A bass line that moves like conversation, not confrontation. Guitar and organ trade spaces, never stepping on each other. It's soul stripped to its bones. That space gives Dusty's voice room to bloom. She wasn't just selling music, she was selling permission. Dusty gave listeners, especially women, permission to be vulnerable without apology. Her songs didn't demand love. They admitted wanting it. That honesty made her dangerous in an era built on performance, and that's why copycats never quite felt right. Dusty didn't imitate Southern soul. She translated it. She brought British melancholy to Memphis swagger. The result was neither fully American nor fully British. It was something new, a hybrid sound that would quietly reshape pop for decades. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. When Dusty in Memphis came out in 1969, it flopped. Critics were confused. Radio stations didn't know where to put it. Too soulful for pop, too pop for R&B. Dusty was heartbroken. She thought she'd failed. But history has a long memory. Decades later, the same album was hailed by Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, and NPR as one of the greatest ever recorded. Artists from Elvis Costello to Adele called it a blueprint for emotional authenticity. The very thing that confused people in 1969 became the future of confessional pop. Solo the chorus of Son of a Preacher Man. Again, you can still feel why. It's not just a love song, it's a collision of faith and desire, sung by someone who understood both too well. That blend of gospel reverence and romantic risk would echo through generations of singers who learned from her. Be honest, be bold, and let your flaws show. By the time Dusty in Memphis found its audience, Dusty herself was fading from the spotlight. But her influence was already everywhere. She'd changed how pop approached soul, and how soul could speak in the language of pop. And that's why Dusty in Memphis still hits. It's not about where it was recorded, but why. It's the sound of a perfectionist learning that imperfection, the tremor in her voice, the hesitation before a high note, is what makes it real. Because Dusty Springfield didn't just bridge genres. She built a bridge between emotion and sound itself. And as the applause faded in Memphis, the world still hadn't caught up. But soon, the price of that authenticity, the weight she carried as a queer woman, a perfectionist, a pioneer, would come crashing down. Behind the eyeliner and spotlight, Dusty Springfield was unraveling. For every song that soared up the charts, there were a dozen sleepless nights, a dozen doubts she couldn't shake. Behind the posters was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity. After Dusty in Memphis, everyone assumed she'd finally found peace. But the truth was darker. The perfection that made her a legend was the same thing slowly breaking her apart. She wanted every note, every breath, to sound like truth. And the more she chased it, the further that truth slipped away. We're going to sit with this for a second. Imagine that level of pressure, being the only woman in the room, in an era where producers, executives, and critics still treated female artists like novelties. Dusty wasn't just fighting for her sound, she was fighting for space to exist on her own terms. By the early 70s, the grind had become unbearable. Endless touring, studio demands, tabloid rumors that cut too deep. Her record sales dipped, and so did her confidence. The press that once praised her as Britain's soul queen now called her difficult, unstable, past her prime. The industry that once loved her emotion now punished her for showing too much of it. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. You can almost hear the exhaustion in her later recordings, the weariness hiding behind every polished note. Dusty turned to alcohol, then to pills, trying to silence the noise in her own mind. Friends drifted away, managers came and went, and the woman who'd once stood against racism and sexism was now fighting herself. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, society was shifting, but not enough. Dusty was a queer woman in a time when the word gay could end careers. She never made a grand announcement. She couldn't. The world wasn't safe for that yet. But she also refused to lie. Her sexuality wasn't a scandal to her. It was simply a truth she carried quietly, with grace and defiance. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Her openness wasn't about rebellion. It was about survival. She once said, "I don't care what people think, as long as they don't stop me from singing." But people did stop her, from record executives to gossip columnists who used her private life as a weapon. She moved to Los Angeles, chasing a comeback and a little peace, but instead found more isolation. The late 70s swallowed her. Albums were shelved. Contracts were dropped. There were hospital stays, stints in rehab, stretches of silence. Most acts fade. Dusty didn't fade. She detonated. And yet, the legend didn't die. In 1987, almost 2 decades after her fall, a synth-pop duo, the Pet Shop Boys, called her up. They wanted her voice on a song called "What Have I Done to Deserve This?" She hadn't been on the charts in years, but the moment she stepped into the booth, it was like time folded. Freeze that frame. Dusty in the studio, hair shorter now, eyes still fierce. She opens her mouth, and there it is again. That ache. That elegance. The song explodes onto radio worldwide, reaching the top 10 across Europe and America. Suddenly, a new generation heard that voice for the first time. And they didn't hear a relic. They heard a survivor. That record did more than revive her career. It reintroduced her to a world that had finally caught up. Gay culture was rising. Pop had become introspective again. And Dusty, once silenced, became an icon for authenticity, proof that vulnerability could outlive fame. But even as her career flickered back to life, her health was failing. Years of addiction and emotional strain had taken their toll. She fought through it with quiet strength, recording her final albums with the same precision that had once terrified producers. Every take still mattered. Every word still carried weight. This is the part fans don't put on T-shirts. Dusty Springfield died in 1999, just before her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But she left behind something no scandal could erase: a legacy built on courage, truth, and the willingness to feel when others couldn't. Dusty Springfield didn't just make soul music, she embodied it. Her pain became her palette, her voice a diary that generations would later read through their own heartbreaks. She paid the price for authenticity, but because she did, the rest of us got to hear what honesty sounds like. And that's why, decades later, her voice still cuts through the static. Because you can polish sound, market image, remix history, but you can't fake soul. Before Dusty Springfield, British pop was clean, careful, and polite. After her, it ached. She gave the UK permission to feel, to cry in stereo, to crave with elegance, to sound both fragile and fierce. And that's where her echo begins. Every singer who's ever stood at a mic and tried to sound raw and graceful at the same time owes something to Dusty. You can hear her fingerprints in Amy Winehouse's smoky phrasing, in Adele's thunder and tears delivery, in Sam Smith's trembling falsetto. Even when they don't mention her by name, they're living in her shadow, in the best way. Spot the lineage. Listen to Amy's Back to Black and Dusty's Dusty in Memphis Back to Back. The same heartbreak, the same refusal to hide behind production gloss. Amy once called Dusty the first British woman who sang like she meant it. Adele took that torch and ran with it. Her phrasing, her storytelling, the way she can whisper and roar in the same bar. It's pure, Dusty DNA. But Dusty's influence wasn't just vocal, it was cultural. She was the bridge between two worlds, British pop precision and American soul grit. Without her, there's no blue-eyed soul as we know it. She made it safe, no, cool, for white British artists to revere Black American music openly. And she did it with respect, not imitation. Freeze the frame on that. A woman in the 1960s, blonde beehive, lashes for miles, standing in front of a mostly male band, singing with the conviction of a gospel preacher. It wasn't about race-bending sound, it was about soul as truth. Dusty didn't borrow. It was an act of reverence. When she refused to perform in apartheid South Africa, when she demanded integrated lineups on TV, she wasn't just a pop star. She was using her fame as a shield for something bigger. That courage rippled forward. Artists like Elton John, Boy George, George Michael, and the Pet Shop Boys all carried that same message, that pop could be political, sensual, and human all at once. And the funny thing is, most of us have already heard Dusty without realizing it. One sample you've heard 1,000 times. Son of a Preacher Man has appeared in everything from Pulp Fiction to modern hip-hop remixes. Her sound sneaks into fashion shows, TikTok edits, commercials. Still elegant, still aching, still unforgettable. Her afterlife has been just as vibrant as her prime. Reissues of Dusty in Memphis sell out every decade. Tribute nights pack theaters. Her name glows on murals in London and Nashville. In 1999, just after her passing, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was bittersweet. She didn't live to see it, but her music had already outlived her body. That's what happens when truth gets pressed to vinyl. Let's time jump to today. What does a 2025 listener hear that 1969 might have missed? Maybe the tenderness, the self-awareness. In an era where pop often feels algorithmic, Dusty sounds human. You can hear her thinking, doubting, feeling in real time. And that's what modern audiences crave again, The flaws that make the beauty feel earned. If you've never listened beyond the hits, start with Dusty in Memphis. It's a masterclass in vulnerability. Then move to A Brand New Me to hear how she redefined herself again. The gateway track? The Look of Love. It's timeless sophistication wrapped in longing, the sound of elegance with an ache underneath. Before Dusty, soul had borders. After Dusty, it belonged to everyone willing to sing from their scars. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. So, your turn. What was the first Dusty Springfield song that hit you in the chest? Or who's the next artist you think deserves a full deep dive? This is Rock Lore, where we keep the echoes alive so they don't get buried by the algorithm. Subscribe, drop your pick in the comments, and hit the next episode, where we trace how another fearless artist turned pain into power. Because history doesn't repeat itself, it sings. And Dusty Springfield's voice? It's still ringing. The journey doesn't end here, rock warrior. Watch this next. The journey doesn't end here, pop lovers. Watch this next.